Tonight's big stories. The National Security Council calls on the Foreign Affairs Department to expel Chinese diplomats over an alleged recording of a phone conversation with a Philippine military general.
Police are now doing a background check on Bamban Mayor Alice Guo after senators questioned her alleged ties to Pogos, and it appeared she had no medical or school records in the Philippines.
And Balikatan 2024 between the United States and the Philippines, the biggest of its kind to date, has officially closed. We'll hear the full assessment of this year's exercises and plans for the next one from Balikatan Executive Agent Colonel Mike Logico.
Good evening. Welcome to the show. I'm Regina.
I'm Gretchen.
And I'm Shawn.
The National Security Council has called on the Department of Foreign Affairs to take appropriate actions against individuals in the Chinese embassy. Let's take a look at the statement. It says, NSC Secretary Eduardo Año said the Chinese embassy's repeated acts of engaging in and dissemination of disinformation, misinformation, and malinformation, now releasing spurious transcripts or recordings of purported conversations between officials of the host country, should not be allowed to pass unsanctioned or without serious penalty.
Now, that statement goes on to say that we emphasize that the unmistakable objective of the PRC embassy in its indiscriminate releasing of these falsehoods and smears have been, and continues to be, to sow discord, division, and disunity between and among the Filipino people. Without a doubt, these are serious breaches of the basic norms of international relations and diplomacy by the embassy.
Año also went as far as calling for the expulsion of those responsible. He says those individuals in Chinese embassy responsible for violating Philippine laws and the Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, and those responsible for these maligning and interference operations must be removed from the country immediately. Yesterday, the DFA reminded diplomats that they should strictly adhere to the 1961 Vienna Convention on Diplomatic Relations, particularly on respecting the laws of host governments.
So I think that was pretty strong coming from Secretary Año of the Security Commission. He did say he wants more than just a reminder, so he's calling for something a lot more harsher than just a summons again, which, as we know, they've done many times before.
Of course, if any wiretapping was done, this is in violation of our Anti-Wiretapping Act. But you can't help but also wonder if there was a call to be tapped in the first place.
Yeah, because we've spoken to some officials who have said that it can't be true. That's probably just Chinese propaganda. But then on the other hand, they're also saying, well, that's wiretapping. So which one is it, right?
Okay, well, yeah.
And we're also looking at the charge of bypassing official and long-established channels and protocols, talking to officials without the requisite authorities or bona fides, and then maliciously claiming that alleged discussion should bind the PH government. That's farcical, foolish, and reckless. This is also part of the National Security Council's statement on that alleged audio recording.
Yes, and if we can recall, the other day, or on Wednesday, Defense Secretary Gibot Teodoro also urged the Foreign Affairs Department to investigate exactly what happened and to determine whether Chinese diplomats indeed have violated the Anti-Wiretapping Act here in the Philippines. Secretary Gibot said, we need to find out who is responsible for this and remove them from the country. So same statements pretty much from the Security Council and from the Defense Department.
At the same time, the Foreign Affairs Department is tightening rules for the issuance of tourist visas to Chinese nationals to fend off, quote, unsavory people and syndicates. The agency insists that this is not related to current national security issues and has to do with curbing POGO activity, or Philippine Offshore Gaming Operators. Now, here to discuss this, we have with us live via Zoom DFA Undersecretary Jesus Domingo. Good evening, Usec. Domingo, thanks for being with us.
Good evening, po.
There's so much to talk about, but first let's get to this new visa rules for the Chinese. You have to admit the timing is a bit suspect, given elevated tensions in the West Philippine Sea, and particularly today with the National Security Council calling for expulsion of Chinese diplomats, which is a very serious escalation in this bitter row over the sea. In any case, the point is, can you walk us through this decision-making process for the DFA? How did it get to this point that you decided, okay, we need to tighten rules for Chinese nationals?
Okay, thank you very much. Big story. Well, actually, let's all go back to last year when, so on one hand, actually, we wanted to facilitate the visa issuance process for two big markets for tourism and investment, basically China and India. So Chinese and Indian nationals must secure visas in order to visit the Philippines, unlike, say, our neighbors in ASEAN, developed countries, OECD countries, and come in visa-free. So we had begun, starting with China, an e-visa project. Basically, people can apply online. We started in August, but because there were some difficulties with, aligning with the payment systems, we had to take the process offline for now to work out the bugs, but also, and this is more tied to this very recent decision to introduce new measures in the visa issuance process, which I'll get to. But also, we just are completing the beta testing of our e-visas for Indian nationals. So, okay. So actually, let's also look at the challenges we've had with passports. So over the past weeks, we've had hearings at the Senate and the House of Representatives looking at the matter of Chinese, but also other nationalities who have illicitly obtained valid Philippine passports. We have a interagency grouping called the Interagency Committee on Passport Irregularities, ICPI. But also, now for the past, recently, we've been seeing more and more instances of fraudulent documents being submitted in support of visa applications overseas, particularly for Chinese nationals. So what we found that in order to help curb this, we should institute, basically, it's not a radical departure from our existing visa issuance regulation. So you had flashed on the screen, basically, for Chinese nationals. Well, actually, any nationals that require a visa to apply to visit the Philippines, they need to present their basic ID, the bank statement, certificate of employment. We have to verify that they have a round-trip ticket and proof of financial capacity. So these are actually in place already. And also personal appearance. Again, we're talking about individual applicants. What is new is that, but the problem had been, we found that there had been numerous instances of fake financial capacity documents, basically, employment, certifications, bank accounts. So we're actually introducing a measure that actually other embassies in China are using, and that is the applicant must produce a social insurance certificate. So social insurance are basically like our SSS or GSIS, and the benefit of that for security purposes, this can be verified with the Chinese government's social insurance authorities. But countries already like the United States, Japan, South Korea have been instituting this step for their visa applications. Also, we will be requiring a clearly identify the sponsor or the host of the visiting Chinese national. We will be, well, there are some other measures. For example, if someone had been rejected from applying, we will lengthen the period by which they can apply again. Okay, so that's for individual visa applicants. Now, for the other way Chinese tourists can come in is through applying with a group visa. So the group visa basically means but it's easier in the sense that, one, you do not need to have a personal interview. You come as a group led by a tour guide, and the tour guide, only it's a tour guide who needs to come to the embassy or the consulate to apply. But this tour guide must be a representative of a legitimate, a verified Chinese tour operator who in turn must be partnered with a Philippine travel agency. So we will now, so the additional security measure we're taking is that a group tour group must comprise of at least 10 individuals. Up to now, it's just we required 3.
Right.
And also, well, this is actually something that we have in place already. If you come in a tour group, you have to arrive in the Philippines together, and you must leave together. And these visas are not convertible.
Right.
Right.
Yun.
But the
Yun po,
whole,
in a nutshell,
Right.
those are our new measures.
Yeah.
For the individual visa, the requirement of social insurance proof, and for the group tour, increasing the number of the group tour from 3 to 10 as a minimum.
Right, Usec, but as you pointed out, just last year, you were talking about e-visas for Chinese and Indian
Yes.
nationals. And then now,
Yes.
less than half a year later, we're talking about tighter restrictions. That is a massive jump. And I'm wondering what happened in between that made you decide to go the other way, especially considering that, okay, I understand your point about curbing POGO activity, but actually POGOs have actually dwindled from the time of former President Duterte. There has been a crackdown, right? So what
Right,
happened
right,
in
right.
that time period? E-visas, last we heard, was supposed to have been implemented by December or August 2023. Was that correct? And then now
Well,
here
we
we
had
are.
we had implemented the e-visa starting August, but because of problems with the payments platform and now so this other problem of fraudulent documents. So this is quite a this is a very involved technical operation. We do this in partnership with the DICT. So we are still working out the bugs there, so they're on pause. But however, may I also add is that we are also eager to increase the number of quality Chinese tourists.
right. You said,
Those who, particularly families, those who are really going for enjoying our world-class beaches, diving, surfing, and whatnot. So there is not really a contradiction in our policy. We want to bring in more matino tourism and keep out the riffraff.
we want the exact same thing, Usec. I understand where you're coming from, but I think what we're curious to know is because one of the rationales that was given behind this change or tightening in the screening process for visas for Chinese nationals was to curb POGO activities. We have heard, of course, we do work in news. We have heard of instances when certain POGO employees are embroiled in like petty crimes, etc. How much of these petty crimes or crimes are the reason exactly behind this tightening in visa screenings?
Well, we must see this in tandem with our tightening up of our passport issuance activities. Again, we've been spending many hours with our legislators looking at how and taking measures to prevent foreigners illicitly obtaining legitimate Philippine passports. So this is actually going hand in hand. So we see the close connection between passport issuance and visa issuance. So this isn't really a radical change in policy, but just a natural consequence of how, well, the whole of government is taking seriously the matter of foreigners who have been coming in illicitly, or they come in legitimately, but illicitly extend their stay or undertake nefarious activities. So
Okay, wait. You mentioned
it's not a radical
passports?
jump, I would say.
Sorry to interrupt, Usec, but you mentioned it's getting a visa and getting a Philippine passport. So some Chinese nationals extend and somehow manage to get Philippine passports. Am I understanding what you said correctly?
Okay, yeah. So, well, look, let's walk through this. First of all, we have many cases and of a number of cases where Chinese, but not just Chinese, also other nationals who have used fake, will have managed to attain legitimate Philippine passports. And the basis of a Philippine passport is a Philippine Statistics Authority issued Philippine birth certificate together with corroborating government documents such as voters' ID or driver's licenses. So there have been hearings in the House and the Senate looking into how these people were able to obtain such documentation. But before they are in the process of obtaining documentation, they had to get to the country, into the country first. And a number of them perhaps came, well, they would have come as tourists, and just got into the Philippines, and then from there, boom, began the process of illicitly obtaining Philippine passports.
So you're saying that it's mostly Philippine documents that are fraudulent. The ones that they're getting are fake Philippine documents to be able to obtain passports, or what kind of?
Well, somehow they were able to get legitimate PSA birth certificates. So this is being investigated, but this is, of course, under the charge of the PSA. So there are a number of ways how they get the legitimate PSA birth certificate, and with the legitimate PSA birth certificate and other corroborating documents, by and large, we have to honor them. However, because many of our frontliners who take in passport applications get a bit suspicious. So sometimes we ask them, sometimes these applicants do not speak Filipino nor English. So in times we flag this with the NBI. We have been able to catch some of these applicants who otherwise present legitimate documents but clearly are not Filipino. We have big suspicion. So again, we are coordinating with our sister agencies, BI, NBI, and so on, to stem this.
Usec, you're talking about tightening it on the tourist visa, and how about the other kinds of visas, such as student visas, working visas? I mean, we know all the suspicion over in Cagayan, over the rise in Chinese students in that area. We have this hearing with the mayor of Tarlac. I mean, how about to that end? Are we also tightening on that end?
Yeah, that definitely that had a bearing on our decision, the Cagayan case. In this sense, is that, well, first of all, so we're focusing first on the simple initial entry visa, visitor's visa. That's what DFA is focusing on. But many students or foreigners who come to study and eventually obtain student visas, they have two choices. They can try to get a student visa overseas through our embassies or consulates, but it's a very difficult and lengthy process. There has to be documentation and verification from CHED, the actual school, and so on. The easier route has been for would-be students to first get a visitor's tourist visa, come to the Philippines, and then convert it once they're in the Philippines. But that process is led by the Bureau of Immigration, but of course, in turn, also coordinated with CHED and the school concerned. But yeah, that's, again, so a gateway to many of these students who are now under scrutiny is they initially, many of them, if not most of them, came initially with visitors' visas and just converted them in the Philippines.
And once they have the passports, do they then, do you find them skirting around like ownership rules, etc.? I'm talking about foreign ownership.
Okay, let's divide the visa issue and the passport issue. I just mentioned both because, again, that's within the purview of Department of Foreign Affairs. But to help get the context why we decided to tighten up our visa issuance process.
Yeah. Chinese tourists are historically one of the largest groups of tourists to the Philippines. So far this year, I think they're third largest. We have the numbers for that. We could just call it up.
Yes.
More than 130,000 so far this year alone, as of April.
Yes.
Did you consult with other agencies before you implemented this measure? For instance, NEDA, for instance, Tourism Department, for instance, the Office of Secretary Guo, who is in charge of bringing in investments?
Well, we have been, even since the e-visa process, we've been in touch. We've attended meetings of the private sector advisory group on tourism. We work closely with the Bureau of Immigration and so on. So in fact, one of the things that we are working on is the revision of the process for accrediting travel and tour agencies.
Yeah, so
But also, there had been meetings with, or this has actually had been the challenge up until recently, is that we found the need to better coordinate the our economic agencies or business-oriented agencies like Department of Tourism, DTI, and so on, with the security sector, with NSA, DND, DILG, PNP. So we really have, it's always a balance between business and economic considerations and national security considerations as well.
absolutely, but apologies, Usec, I didn't quite understand your answer. So this was signed off on by NEDA, Tourism Department, DTI, and Osamea?
Well, we have, the Department of Foreign Affairs has the prerogative with regards to visa issuance. And we have an ongoing conversation with them. But we felt that this was really reaching, requiring immediate action on our part. And even before, up to now, that our posts overseas have always had the discretion to require more documentation or more interviews, for example, from applicants who, we would have some questions about. But definitely, we are in close coordination with our other agencies, sister agencies.
And when do you expect to roll out these new rules?
We were in the process of doing that within this month. But again, we have to, also this will take some time as announcements and what's indicated in the website will take a few days, but we looked at completing this process within this month of May.
Okay. Just in time for the end of summer. But thank you so much for your time and taking time out to clarify the issue with us, DFA Undersecretary Jesus Domingo.
Now, speaking of national security and documentation or lack thereof, the police is now looking into the background of Bamban Mayor Alice Guo after Senator Risa Ontiveros raised the possibility that she is a Chinese asset trained to infiltrate the government.
Hindi tayo nagkukumpiyansa because this concerns national security. At when we speak of national security, at talagang yung ginagawa nating intelligence gathering and monitoring ay magtutuloy-tuloy yan, of course, with the help and cooperation of other law enforcement agencies po.
Earlier this week, Guo was summoned to the Senate over her alleged connections to two pogo operators in her town. She denied having any affiliations with pogos, but did admit that she was an incorporator in the past of Baofu Corporation, a company that owns the compound that houses pogos. But what's got social media abuzz is Guo's lack of documentation. Ontiveros pointed out that she had no school records at all, to which Guo replied that she was homeschooled from grade school to high school and never went to college. Her birth was also only registered when she was already 17. And there are no hospital records of her birth because Guo says she was born at home. Guo is currently serving her first term as local mayor and had no prior public service experience.
But she can speak Tagalog.
She can.
She's had videos.
She
She's
can.
put up vlogs.
And her humor is also very Filipino.
It is very Filipino.
Mahilig
But
niya.
I mean, I was awake until Gretchen knows this. She knows what time last night because it was all over social media. So much content has been made on her reply. So I'm really curious to find out what's
Curious.
behind
Yeah.
the Bamban Mayor Alice Guo.
But what people are saying is that she came from nowhere and suddenly she became mayor just
Yeah,
one
I
day
think- I
after
think
she
she
was
was-
announced by the
The
former
previous
mayor.
mayor.
Yes, she was endorsed.
Right? So who was she? In a very small town where everyone knows everyone, parang, it's curious that no one knows this person who suddenly became mayor one day, right?
And she ran as an independent. I also checked kasi I saw, of course, I Googled her extensively. All her banners were
She's
pink.
no political party.
Yeah.
Meron
She had
pang mga supercars with her name. Right?
Curious
And,
naman talaga.
tapos I think she owns a farm.
She does.
Poultry farm.
An egg farm because I watched her vlog about it. It was 20 minutes long. And
And apparently, hog farm as well. Apparently, they're hog raisers.
And-
According to her.
According
According to the Senate hearing.
I don't think it's the last we'll hear of it.
Definitely not.
Definitely dig deeper into that. But up next, This year's Balikatan exercises between the Philippines and the United States have officially come to a close. We'll discuss the learnings with Colonel Michael Logico when we return. Stay with us.
Welcome back. You're still watching The Big Story here on One News.
Balikatan 2024, the biggest joint military exercise ever, formally closed earlier today. And already, Philippine and U.S. militaries are talking about an even bigger one next year. As early as now, some countries have apparently already expressed interest in participating in the drills. Mon Walvis with the rest of that story.
Representatives of the Armed Forces of the Philippines and the U.S. Armed Forces have rolled up the Balikatan 2024 flag, a symbol of the official closing of the 19-day joint military exercises between the two nations. From sea, air, and land, U.S. and Philippine troops staged different scenarios and underwent tactical drills to strengthen their military capabilities and interoperability. According to Defense Secretary Gilbert Teodoro, this year's Balikatan is the biggest in 4 decades. But he says this is just a preview of the even bigger and wider Balikatan exercise being planned for 2025. The defense chief adds that even President Bongbong Marcos is already excited for it.
He looks forward to next year's exercise, which will be I believe, the full battle simulation, which will put to the test the combined capabilities in the most realistic of scenarios possible, with safety in mind.
The AFP clarifies, though, that next year's Balikatan will not be all about war games or combat drills. The troops will also bring focus on other tactical aspects of war and calamity response.
It's all about preparation for everything that a nation expects. It includes management of civilian populace, the management of the our management for disaster relief.
The AFP also targets to include other agencies as participants in the next Balikatan, including the Philippine Coast Guard, Philippine National Police, Department of Foreign Affairs, and Department of Information and Communications Technology. They say this move encourages a whole of government and whole of people approach in resolving possible problems or crises in the future. Aside from the US, other countries have also expressed openness to join next year's Balikatan. This follows the French Navy statement saying that they wish to have more maritime exercises together with the Philippine Navy. President Marcos says he's in favor of allowing more countries to participate in the annual drills.
Napakalaking bagay yan dahil ito lang ang paraan upang magarantiya natin na ang West Philippine Sea ay patuloy ang tinatawag na freedom of navigation at ang daming dumadaan dyan. Kailangan libre, ligtas ang lugar ng West Philippine Sea.
For News 5, Mon Gualvez, we are One News.
To give us an assessment of Balikatan 2024 and their plans for next year's drills, we have with us back tonight on the show, Balikatan 2024 Executive Agent Colonel Mike Logico. Magandang gabi po.
Good evening. Thank you again for inviting me.
Oh, you're fresh from the drills today. In this year's Balikatan, we saw around 17,000 troops. We saw the French Navy. We saw BRP Caleraya sink. We also saw the presence of Chinese navies. What is your general assessment of this year's drills?
Well, all I can say is that we are very satisfied with the result of the exercise. There are a lot of the things that we were looking for in terms of interoperability between us and the United States. We really put that to the test. Especially the exercises that we just recently conducted, which is the maritime strike, which is by far, in my experience at least, the most complex of all operations that I've ever been in. It involved a lot of moving parts, especially yung use of C4I sensors, secured communications, working through a kill chain process, and getting target authorization from the president to prosecute the target. All of that, it seems so simple by just making kwento, pero in reality, it was really tough, and we worked through it because we really prepared hard for this.
Colonel, I remember prior to the commencement of the exercises, we were kind of hinting about what could happen in the EEZ with the American, Philippine, and French Navy sailing off there, possibly a water cannon incident. But we're hearing bits and pieces of what exactly transpired. Tell us about that group sail and what happened over there with the Chinese Navy tried to interrupt the drills.
Okay, generally, the general story is that as the group sail was underway, steaming south from after turning through the tip of Palawan, they were being followed by two PLAN ships, the 167 and the 793. They entered into the opera box. We call it the opera box, the operations box, where the group sail was conducting their gunnery exercises. This is actually a hazard. There's a reason why we have a notice to mariners published weeks in advance before the conduct of an exercise. It's really for the safety of other mariners, other ships that may accidentally enter into an exercise area. A gunnery exercise involves live fire, whether small arms or much more complex armaments. And to enter into a training area in the middle of the sea. It is hazardous for those who will enter. So we have an SOP that if there are any intrusions into the opera box, anybody can put a halt to the exercise. This is as a safety precaution, so nobody accidentally hits something that they don't want to hit.
Okay, and there was a little fishing boat, I think, a small one from the Philippine side that accidentally went in. Did that cause a lot of disruption?
You mean to say the maritime strike in Ilocos Norte?
Yes, I believe it was that.
Yes, yes. The picket boats were able to stop them, and they ushered them away from the opera box just for their own safety.
What behavior
And after that, we continued on with the exercise.
What behavior did you notice with the Chinese maritime militia and the Chinese navies? I mean, usually when we have resupply missions, parang nakikipagpatintero po yan eh. May blocking movements. But with these exercises, did they follow our vessels? Did they stay away? Did they stay farther? What did you observe?
Well, the distance that they were covering away from our group sail was between 4 to 5 nautical miles, which from a range safety perspective is safe for them. But you can never really tell. The mere fact that they entered into the opera box, and I would say it's probably intentional. They already knew the risks before doing that. And probably they were also counting on us to know our safety procedures, and we do. We put a halt temporarily to the exercise just for their safety. Of course, you would understand, the group sail tried hailing them, but there was no response. In fact, they even turned off their AIS, which is the reason why they unexpectedly entered. Of course, we don't really expect, to have any hostile engagement with anybody from the opera box, but there's always that certain degree of preparedness just in case. Just in case they would be foolish enough to try anything overtly hostile against warships coming from the Philippines and our treaty allies.
When we spoke to you before the exercises started, Colonel, you said combat readiness demonstration was the primary goal for this year.
Absolutely.
What did Balikatan this year teach you about the Philippines' combat readiness?
Well, what it's taught us is that we have come a long way. I have been involved in Balikatan since 2016, and I've seen how Balikatan has progressed from just the tactical formations, and now we're going into the operational level of war. When I say operational level, that means we're dealing with a lot of moving parts. When you're dealing with the Army, the Navy, and the Air Force working together. When these three components work together, you're dealing with different processes, different doctrines, different cultures. That takes a lot of effort to do. And from my standpoint, I think we've gone a long way compared to previous Balikatan exercises. And the mere fact that we're also able to do it with our treaty allies means that even they also struggle with the same things that we're struggling with. But to do it together, that increases the complexity tenfold, hundredfold. I would say that we have still a lot of things to work out, but these are structural in nature. I am not at liberty to discuss it here, but for as long as we face the problem squarely and understand the root causes of these friction points, I'm confident that we are able to deal with it. We have an entire year to prepare for the big one next year.
Okay, Colonel, I want to ask you about some of the quote-unquote, very many quotes, toys that you were able to quote-unquote play with in this year's Balikatan. There was a Typhoon missile system that I think first time to be deployed in the Indo-Pacific. How was it working with those things and a lot of hardware that the Americans brought in? And are we going to be able to keep some of them?
Okay, first question, the Typhoon missile system, you're talking about the MRC, the mid-range capability weapon. We had no plans really to fire them, to use them in a live exercise. We were able to use them in a simulation. That means they go through the drills without actually firing it. That missile system, actually, it is the closest that we have to that is the recently acquired BrahMos missile system. And the reason why they brought it in is because the United States also knows that we just acquired the BrahMos, and we are looking forward to having the BrahMos and the MRC working together in the next exercise. This is also very significant because this is a game changer type of a weapon system. But moving away from the BrahMos, this is also the first time that we were able to fire the Navy Sea Star missile system. Apart from the Sea Star, we were also able to fire the NLOS, a non-line of sight missile coming from the fast attack interdictionary craft. The Sea Star naman was fired from one of our frigates, the BRP Jose Rizal. These two missile systems effectively bring us into the missile age. And I never thought I'd be around to witness that. And from the videos that were posted, that were released, all of them hit their targets. And you could already imagine, it would be hard for me to describe the euphoria that all of us felt in our secured location together with the president, that we were able to hit those targets. And to see it for the first time, it was really overwhelming.
But going back to, I think you promised to get back on with us if the Typhoon missile system will be kept here in the Philippines.
Yeah. I said get back to me in June.
June ba?
Yeah.
Walang date,
I know
sabi
what,
mo.
I know what I said because I was here when I said it.
May date na. Yan ba? O sige, babalikan namin
argue with
kayo.
the Colonel.
Come back to me in June if it's still here.
So have you started
Okay.
preps for next year? As early as now?
Immediately after the closing ceremony, all of us were the lead planners for Balikatan. We went to another room and we started talking about what we're going to do for next year. So that's really how we work. As soon as we wrap up one training cycle, we move on to the next training cycle. And that means our job is continuous 365 days in a year.
Right.
So unlike what I hear people saying, especially on social media, na pagtapos na yung Balikatan, uwi na naman sila. No, that couldn't be further from the truth. Because after this, we have other exercises as well. We have the Salaknib exercise, we have Kamandag, we have Masa. All of these are not only Balikatan, but they're continuous streams of exercises intended to keep us on our toes 365 days in a year.
Colonel, just before we let you go, is the planned Luzon corridor going to be very helpful in terms of interoperability with regard to the Balikatan exercises, with regard to interoperability with the American forces?
I'm sorry, I'm not familiar with that. Luzon corridor.
Yes. Yung pinag-usapan po sa trilateral meeting, Japan, US, and the Philippines.
Oh yes. I think from a logistical standpoint, that would be that would be tremendous in helping us get from one place to the other. You have to understand, when you talk about exercises, military operations, what you normally imagine are those live fire exercises that you would see. Those are the more exciting activities.
Right.
The less exciting but equally important, and probably even if it's boring, you can't do away without it. It's really logistics.
Yeah.
Getting brigades from one point to the next. getting weapon
yeah.
systems from one point to the next. That's very important.
So what we'll
And
do
you
is
you hit it on the head. You hit the nail on the head.
Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. That would be very helpful for us, and it doesn't take a lot of imagination.
So we'll put it on our agenda and check back in with you again as well later in the year.
June.
Thank you so much
Thank you
for
so much.
joining us tonight. 2024 Balikatan 2024 Executive Agent Colonel Mike Logico. We're going to pause for a very last short break, but right after that, President Marcos questions the credibility of former PDEA agent Jonathan Morales and calls him a professional liar. The rest of that story when we return. Stay with us. Welcome back. You're still watching the big story here in One News.
President Marcos has spoken up about the former PDEA agent who has been linking him to illegal drugs. This time around, though, he did not laugh it off. News 5's Raynel Pawid joins us now for the details. What do you have, Raynel?
President Marcos had a lot to say about former PDEA agent Jonathan Morales. The president spoke to the reporters today on the sidelines of the government aid distribution in General Santos City.
Mahirap naman bigyan ng importansya yan. You know, this fellow is a professional liar. Parang jukebox yan eh. Kung ano yung hulog mo na, basta maghulog ka ng pera, kahit anong kantang gusto mo, kakantayin niya. Oo, kaya walang saysay.
To recall, President Marcos is reacting to the allegedly leaked PDEA report linking him and other personalities like actress Maricel Soriano to illegal drug use. Morales earlier testified in the Senate, saying the documents were authentic, although he could not disclose the confidential informant of that report. Incumbent PDEA officials, meanwhile, have denied that such report exists. President Marcos also questioned Morales' credibility. The former PDEA agent was dismissed in 2013 for grave misconduct, dishonesty, and conduct prejudicial to the best interests of the service.
Tignan mo na lang ang kanyang record. Tignan mo na lang kanya, may kaso siya na false testimony. O yan, ganyan. Ilan bang marami siyang history na kung sino-sino sinasangkot kung saan-saan. Hindi, parang yun ang hanap buhay yata niya. Kaya professional liar ang tawag ko sa kanya.
During the president's event, we also caught updates on boxing legend and former Senator Manny Pacquiao's plans for 2025. This was how President Marcos introduced him in his speech today.
Siguro hindi na pa kailangan ipakilala at babatiin ko na lang ang idol ko, ang idol nyo, ang idol nating lahat, ang dating senador at babalik na senador, Senator Manny Pacquiao.
We just got word from Pacquiao's camp that he is indeed set to run for senator once again next year. We were also able to confirm that he is going to run under Partido Federal ng Pilipinas, the political party of President Marcos. For One News, this is Raynel Pawid, News 5.
All right, just enough time for our big picture this Friday night. And we're gonna leave you with a healthy dose of girl power because you're actually looking at a photo of the Philippine Military Academy's top 10 cadets of Bagong Sinag class of 2024. Now, this year's graduating class consists of 278 cadets, 224 of whom are men and only 54 are women. But still, 7 ladies made up the top 10 of this year's batch. Surigao City's Jeanette Elumba led the class as top-notcher. Now, aside from graduating top of her class, Jeanette is also the recipient of several awards, including the Presidential Sabre, which she will receive from President Bongbong Marcos during their graduation rites on May 18. Jeanette is set to join the Philippine Army after graduating.
Girl power.
Well, that's pretty impressive. 7 out of 10.
Right. Dumadami na, kasi usually sa mga trips ko, dumadami na yung mga babaeng sundalo nakakasama namin. And there was one time in the Air Force that it was a female pilot that brought us, I think, from Manila to Batanes. And I was like, and she was carrying generals on the plane.
And I mean, the spokesperson of the
galing,
UFP
galing.
is
Very
Colonel
first,
Padilla.
Female
First
spokesperson.
female spokesperson. The spokesperson of the Supreme Court is now, for the first time, also female. But really, I mean,
I
top
think we're
7...
very matriarchal here in the Philippines, don't you think? I mean, early on we had our first female president when it wasn't uso everywhere else in the world.
But there are parts of society here that are still very
matriarchal,
male-centric. Like for one,
shackles.
government, there are more male senators, congressmen. Same goes with the army, but now we're seeing more and more.
So we could see, let's see, next year's...
But the mere fact that 7 out of the 10 top-notchers were female, that's really something to shout about, right?
It is.
It
I
means-
mean, I've heard the PMA is really, really tough.
Of course, it's the military, right?
Hoping
So,
for more decision makers, female decision makers.
female voices
Yeah.
in the top
I
decision-making
told you
echelons.
guys, I was gonna leave you this week with a lot of girl power. That's it for the big story this
It
week.
is a Friday. We are One News, all sides, all the time.
Thanks for tuning in. Have a good night and a great weekend.